Hello everyone, I'm Aurora City VA, the VTuber whose survival at the end of this month is completely optional. Like, seriously, I'm barely at the start of June and I've already been full of things to take care of. I am not going to make it out alive. This video is part of my first ever series on this channel, the World of Tutorials. A descending series where we journey through a lot of tutorials towards the worst of them all. But despite being in a downward spiral, for the moment we have been analyzing some incredible tutorials in the last episodes. And today is not different, since skippable tutorials are some of my favorite types of tutorials in the video game sphere. But how can you do an experience optional and fully implemented in the game at the same time? Today, I will cover 3 games in total: Cuphead, Elden Ring, and... Is that a fucking elephant? Anyways, Cuphead is an incredible 2D platformer concentrated on an absurdly high skill ceiling, making it notorious for how hard it is to complete. But one of the biggest things this game has is its love for the rubber house animations of the 1980s. The tutorial doesn't have a set beginning, because it doesn't happen automatically when we start a new save file. Instead, it's a completely optional level that the players can ignore and move on, letting them decide whenever to stop to see the basic commands, or if they already know them, skip to a main attraction. And what is the tutorial stage? A blank room with... Okay, this is getting old. A blank room with commands plastered all over the walls, explaining all of the commands and how to implement them throughout the levels and boss battles. At any point of the game, if a player forgets anything about the gameplay, they can return to the tutorial and see what they were missing. It's so simple and to the point that I really don't have anything to say, really. Cuphead only has one objective in its tutorial, and it performs incredibly well without any hidden depth or anything. I could be talking all day long about how in the writing on the wall you need to press jump to jump, but it's a simple and direct to the point that no one could ever be confused or... Okay, let's address this fucking elephant. Yes, I know about the game journalists that had difficulty beating the tutorial stage. It's not relevant to the discussion, but considering that this tutorial became notorious because of this episode, I might as well mention it. Here's the thing. I still stand by the fact that this tutorial is incredibly simple to understand and direct to the point, especially since there are no threats or timers attached to this stage that could pose a threat or hinder the experience. The only complex part of this tutorial is the game expecting you to press more than 2 buttons in a sequence of button presses. And considering the absolute nightmare that this game will throw at the players with some of the later bosses, this is the bare minimum to survive more than one attack, let alone beat the game. Okay, now that we dealt with that mammal, how about we return to discuss game design with Elden Ring? This game is an incredibly acclaimed spiritual successor to both Dark Souls and Bloodborne. I think also Sekiro, but I never played that one, so I can't confirm. And it claimed an incredible success by the merit of being an incredible game, and zero fucks for the people who are not willing to sit and learn how it works little by little. We start the game in a lone room after the customary creating a character and intro cutscenes, with an item that won't be relevant for the tutorial, and no other choices but to go forward towards a boss designated to kill us, or to lead us off the ledge ourselves. And after being adopted by a reindeer horse, we can officially start the game. The game immediately pops up a text to let us know about the optional tutorial, has a ghost NPC to point us to the tutorial, and a text that specifies that there is the tutorial. So, all things considered, it's pretty much impossible to accidentally skip it. The player should be able to see where it is, so they can decide if to approach it or not. With that said, a friend of mine accidentally missed all of it and discovered about the tutorial in a second moment. Guess FromSoft should have hanged some neon signs as well. But anyway, if we take the plunge, we initiate the tutorial stage, seeing the Elden Ring equivalent of a bonfire, and we can approach it to be interrupted by a wall of text. Okay, weird, but maybe it's just to make sure that people coming from Dark Souls know what the new bonfire equivalent is. Anyway, afterwards we continue to the dungeon and the game stops us to explain how the mana bar to use spells works, and I'm not going to feign ignorance for any longer. This game resorts to wall of fucking text to explain its tutorial. Today is not the occasion to explain why I think this is one of the worst ways to enter a tutorial. I will have a dedicated episode to this kind of tutorial later on. But let me give you a quick retelling on why I hate this decision and why I can kind of accept it here specifically. When you stop the player on his tracks to read a whole ass wall of text outside of their wheel, stopping everything they are doing just to explain something that the players could have explored for themselves, especially in a video game, it's incredibly horrible to experience. I'm in the middle of an adventure. Don't stop me to specify that the attack button can make me attack. This is even more baffling considering the previous games handled this way better by making the writings explain what button does what completely optional and ready to be read at any time in the tutorial stage. But, and I need you to understand that this is a big but, I can accept this approach. And that's because these pop-up windows are extremely strict to the point in explaining what button does what. And when you start a new run with another save file being present, it automatically skips set word of text, and they never appear again. So there is respect for the player's intelligence. I still think they handled this better in the previous games, don't get me wrong, it's kind of a shame. But it's not like it ruins the game overall, and actually, I can accept it. I still hate it, but I can live with it. And how does this tutorial stage end? With a boss battle against a generic soldier. And the game introduces us to the last pop-up about the counter-attack mechanic you can do after blocking, and by using it I just two-shotted the boss with the equivalent of the priest class. I did hear that this was one of the most busted mechanics in the game, but holy tree is this a little much. And after that poor excuse of a boss, we can exit from the tutorial stage with a peculiar prize. An emote ready to be used at our convenience! You know what? Bonus points for creativity, I love this. Generally speaking, this is how various games handle their optional tutorial. There are separate level or dungeon for you to get acquainted with the gameplay in a tailored baby's first level, and they can either be introduced naturally or be forced down the throat. So the players have no excuses about the game not explaining how things work, since they have the option to learn at any moment. But in my opinion, there's one game that handled the optional tutorial stage in such a way that every single other game has no choice but to pale in comparison. Dark Souls 2. If you like the show, please like, comment and subscribe. A little bit of support goes a long way. You heard me right. I am claiming that Dark Souls 2 handled the optional tutorial in a superior way compared to Elden freaking Ring, the game that to this day divides the fandom in half between the people that claim that this is the black sheep of the franchise versus the people that, even recognizing its shortcomings, love and appreciate not only what this game brought to the franchise, but also love the game itself. I'm of the second group, in case you were wondering. The game starts with the usual special intro cutscene where the world is fucked, and afterwards we start the game before we have the chance to create the character, letting the players be in a helpless scenario since they don't have anything to fend for themselves. If the players so choose, they can explore the surroundings, but eventually all roads lead to the hut, full of condescending grandmas, where we can create our character as we get introduced to the function of the effigies of this game. And then we are able to continue to our road towards the tutorial area of the game. This tutorial area is basically a straight road. You can get into the main hub Majula immediately and ignore the tutorial stage without any problem. But we are here to study it, so we are delving into the various corridors with the optional texts that introduces us to the various mechanics one by one, with the occasional goodie over here and there. There's also a whole optional system where we can trade rock items to have a chance to obtain good items like peculiar weapons, upgrade materials, and good old useful stuff. Technically speaking, there's also one in the tutorial area of the first Dark Souls, a game that I did cover in the very first episode, but that one is hidden on the ledge of Oblivion and most players do not attempt to go near that, so I didn't analyze it because, yeah, I don't think this was designed as a part of the tutorial for the players to go there. I think it was thought for a secret since returning to the tutorial stage is a secret on itself. While in Dark Souls 2, as long as you participate in the tutorial, it is pretty much in the middle of the road and unmissable. And since if you explore in the area before the old ladies, the one with the waterfall, you are bound to discover at least one of these smooth and silky stones you can interact with a trade immediately. Especially if you took the stone gift when creating the character. Speaking of the area before the old ladies, exploring a bit, we can find an ogre that is guarding an item. A pretty unfair and brutal challenge without any proper gear, but once we obtain our class, it's a lot fairer challenge that we can tackle for some extra goodies. Most importantly, a ring that could be reasonably used in the end game, since it helps doing more poise damage to the enemies. But I hear you. What I said so far hardly justifies it as being the best optional tutorial. Or at least it does, but not by a far wide margin, like I otherwise claimed so. What differentiates Dark Souls 2 from any other tutorials is the fact that this one is designed to be explored later on in the game too. And that's because one of the zones is blocked by a statue that you need to use a fragrant branch of yore to unlock. An item you can find in a couple of places later on in the game, and usually you would not use the first branch you obtain on the tutorial since it's required to unlock bosses and a whole lot of areas. But you can buy one at the start of the game for 12,000 souls, and since this game is incredibly generous in its souls gain, you can obtain them fairly easily. Regardless of when you unlock it, once you do, you have access to the enemies that drop stones for infusions, and Nistus Shardpiece to have more heals available, but most importantly enough, 2 ogres that ready an assault once you get close enough. An optional encounter that on its own doesn't give you anything if not a couple of souls, but by completing it, you can access a neat weapon at the old lady's hut. On its own, this thing does nothing, but by having it equipped, your stats are raised up. But in the same place, you can encounter an optional mini-boss, one that I love to fight every single time in every single encounter, for a twinkling Titanite and a coffin that we can use to switch genders. From what I understand, it's because of a bug in the game that could randomly switch genders to the playable characters. And since they couldn't figure out how to solve it, they said, fuck it, free transgender coffin for everyone. And I made the video just in time for Pride Month, so yay! And the tutorial has one last secret for us. For if we light up all the torches standees in the area, we can unlock an optional enemy that drops a petrified item to trade with the crows for a high tier trade. So, this optional tutorial has plenty of prizes for you to take. It immediately shows you the fragrant branch of your mechanic by blocking a path of it with a statue. It teaches the player that by lighting up all the torches and in general playing with the surroundings, something may happen, and it rewards the players when they go down to business and tackle all the optional challenges. I do understand that a lot of people do not like this game, but the tutorial is objectively incredible and a golden example of optional tutorial. But as for me, I have to see what the next episode of the World of Tutorials is going to be. Trying to see what kind of tutorials to talk about is going to be a challenge.